Hello, everyone. Welcome to Two Jiujiteiras. I'm your host, Babs. The podcast is rooted in connection. Here we dive into conversations with people who care deeply about movement, mental and physical health, self-care, longevity. It's about learning from each other and growing together on and off the mats. Today, I'm joined by Josh Chung, a physiotherapist, mobility specialist, and lifelong martial artist. He blends science back to rehab with real world training and has a deep passion for helping people move better and stay strong on and off the mats. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, that was pretty good. Thanks for having me. That was a really good intro. I don't know where you got all that information from, but that was spot on.
I snuck a little bit of your bio off your site. Kinetic Labs.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah.
I don't need to introduce myself anymore. That was great.
Well, I know with working with Rachel Glover, who I interviewed back a few weeks ago, spoke very highly of you. I see your stuff on social media, with your clients and stuff like that. So looks like you have a really good, really amazing setup.
It's fun. It's definitely nice to, it also like what I've been telling people is it keeps me consistent with my training because sometimes I'll wake up in the mornings and I feel like I don't want to come, but then I have a patient at 8, so I gotta be here anyways. So that's been helpful. It's been
That
nice.
that's awesome. I could use something like that. So I guess just your origin story. Tell us a little bit about kind of what led you into physiotherapy and how has martial arts kind of been part of that journey?
Okay. So as far as origin stories go, I personally don't think it's super interesting because sometimes you'll hear physios say, "Oh, I had this massive injury, and like that's what brought me into getting rehab as a kid, and that's where I knew what I wanted to do." For me, it wasn't quite like that. Like I did martial arts growing up my whole life, so I feel like I was always interested in the human body, interested in how things work, and then whenever I would see kind of like sports documentaries on TV, I would always be like very interested in like how they were training, what they were doing exercise wise. I just didn't realize it at the time. So throughout high school, I took exercise science. I was like, this is pretty cool. And I thought the only next step from there was to become a physiotherapist. So luckily that all worked out. And luckily I really enjoy what I do. Uh, that's kind of what led into physio. And then the jiu-jitsu side of things or the martial arts side of things just kind of blended into that where partway into physio, I decided I wanted to get back into jujitsu and I found the gym that I'm training at right now. And that's where I met Rachel, that's where I met Nick. And that's what organically turned into this space downstairs from the gym, which has been quite convenient.
Okay, awesome. How long have you been doing this for?
Physio
Yeah.
or
The physiotherapy.
mm, about 8 years now. Yeah, 2016. So that would be what, 8, 9 years?
Mm-hmm.
Time flies. Yeah,
Okay. Wow.
close to a decade.
And you're mobile, like you work kind of like here on site and then you have another place that you work with patients as well.
Yeah, so I would you could kind of say let's consider this like my clinic, right? So
Okay.
this is where I'm running curated mobility out of, and then the other spot I'm at, I'm kind of like a contractor out of another clinic. So
Okay.
yeah, two spaces in Toronto.
Okay, perfect. And I also saw on your website too, you got some like virtual stuff as well that you can work with people.
Which has been fun because especially with the social media presence that I've been lucky enough to build, sometimes there'll be interest from like out of province or kind of like international or even from like coaches and clinicians from other places who just want to kind of like talk shop. So it's nice to have that as an option and it allows me to not be, I guess, solely dependent on the local demographic.
Okay, interesting. So I also noticed that you studied abroad in Japan and Australia, and like so curious how that shaped your approachment to movement or health. Like, what was that influence there?
Yo, you've really done your research. I love that. Um, so I wouldn't really say the time in Japan changed anything like movement wise. I think an interesting part there was because it was just um what's it called, like an exchange semester. We kind of like just take whatever courses we want. So I took a judo course while I was there.
Nice.
I didn't really I still suck, but it was fun. It was fun to do. It was kind of fun to learn. It's a cool little flex to say I learned judo in Japan until they see what my judo looks like. Um, But the Australia one was where I was actually in physio school, so I was, I guess, a bit more serious about learning things then. The interesting thing was just how differently physio was kind of approached in different places. Because back then, at least here in Canada, we were still quite old school in kind of like how we were learning physio. Like if you've been to physio before, you probably have the image of like the typical kind of like old school setup where you're just in a room and they're hooking you up with a bunch of machines and maybe rubbing you with some gel and then they kind of like good luck going back to sport kind of thing. As soon as we landed in Australia, they were like, yeah, we don't do any of that. They'll do a bit of manual work, but it was quite a bit more exercise based. So I feel like that kind of like inspired me a little bit to kind of go on the path I'm on now, where I'm a lot more movement based and a lot less with those machines, I guess.
That's great. It's because yeah, it can be kind of discouraging, I guess, if you're going in and just kind of like hooked up and here you go and good luck. Like you're on
Yeah,
your own. So
yeah. It's like you can't really see how it's like how am I going to get back to sport if all I'm doing is lying on a table and someone's rubbing my leg and but I need to be able to run or change directions or throw someone or something like that, right?
yeah, totally
Yeah.
fair. Um, I also noticed that you like dry needling was kind of mentioned on there as part of like some of the stuff that you learned. What's your thoughts on that? What do you?
This was very early days in my career. And I do think it's, I don't want to step on everyone's toes here. I do think that needling, I have a bunch of colleagues who are much better at it than I am. So oftentimes I'll just kind of like refer out to them. It can be a useful tool to kind of help calm things down in the short term. So if someone's coming in and nothing we're doing is calming anything down, we're not really finding any doors into like exercise or movement, something like needling can be helpful then to kind of calm some of those symptoms down to then open some of those doors.
Mhm.
Admittedly, I don't do a ton of it myself anymore now. There's only a maybe a couple of clients on my entire caseload that I'll do needling with, but it's a tool in my back pocket that is useful to have every now and then, I guess.
It's fair. I've actually had experience with needling and it's been
What do you think?
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
just some stubborn like knots that I have just from like childbirth and stuff and some injuries. And it's like, okay, let's get you a little bit of relief here. And I was just like, oh, wow.
exactly. Yeah. And when it works really quickly and works really well. And then there's the people who like, well, I'll always ask, like, are you afraid of needles? But before
Right.
we do anything, because I've had someone pass out on me once.
Oh,
Um, but aside from that, like if it works great. And it's very helpful in just like calming things down, just kind of like getting you on your way to do some of the other stuff again, right?
yeah. No, that's super cool. Um, so I guess like in your years of practicing, like how is because with jujitsu, how has that influenced kind of like your work as a physiotherapist as you've been progressing?
That's an interesting question. I think I think how I like to see it is almost like similar to how your game might change with jujitsu, or kind of like how you might pick up different techniques, different systems. I feel like, and I have this conversation with students sometimes as well, because it's interesting how I see physio in a very similar way. Like the way I practice now is definitely quite different from how I practiced at the start. And even if I compare to like a year or two ago, like you can see a couple of changes here and there. I probably picked up a couple of things here and there and started to implement that into my approach or into my philosophy. I wouldn't say starting jujitsu has kind of like dramatically changed anything aside from maybe some of the clientele I'm seeing and some of the exercises that I might be using a little bit more often just because of the injuries that we see with jiu-jitsu as opposed to say like basketball or soccer. But I think luckily I was already pretty, I had a pretty established framework by the time I started doing jiu-jitsu again and by the time I had to work with people like Rachel again. So there weren't like dramatic shifts in how I was approaching things.
Okay. Um, I guess with that, like do you think like grapplers overlook some things to recovery or movement? Like where's you're noticing the trends of like your your clientele being more martial arts based?
I think grapplers overlook a ton.
Okay.
I think I think also because like your typical jiu-jitsu practitioner is probably like not many of us. I'm not, but not a lot of us are professional athletes who are treating jiu-jitsu like a professional athlete would. Like typically when we're coming to class, it's after a full work day where we've for the most part been kind of like sitting in one position for a long time. And then we come on the mats and we have to put ourselves in all these weird positions. We got to be upside down. Someone kind of like twisting us in one way and we're trying to twist in another way. And I think what I tell a lot of people is like, oftentimes it's that disparity between what we're usually doing and what we have to do on the mats that's going to be one of the biggest contributors to injury or pain or anything like that. Right. So to go back to your question of like what people might be overlooking, it might even just be as simple as like getting some of that movement in either throughout the day or prior to training. And in a more kind of structured sense, that might just be something as simple as like a structured strength and conditioning program
Okay.
that keeps you strong throughout all these places so that you're not taking a body that can't really do much and forcing it to do a lot.
Okay. And do you have any tips for like people who do have office work that maybe can't get away, like for like a gym session, let's say, for like some strength training during the day before they get to class? Is there any kind of like tips or tricks for like helping you kind of ease that like you said, that disparity from like what they do all day to now you're
Mhm.
doing some intense
Yeah,
mobility
absolutely. Like
movements?
like people in the gym will make fun of me a lot for it because it's probably the first thing that I'll tell someone to do, whether they're pulling me aside as like a question or if we're formally working together. But we'll refer to them as cars, controlled articular rotations. And really all you're doing with a car is you're taking that target joint and moving it through every single direction it can go in without moving anything else. Right. So
Cool.
you could do that in a bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to be a car. It's just something that is easy to remember and something that's easy to do. And how I'll often encourage people to do it as is almost just like movement snacks throughout the day, right? Because here we can kind of see my neck, but all we're doing with a car is just taking that joint and kind of going through all of these positions that, like, say over here, this is like heavy cross face pressure. When you're all the way down here, this is when you're being stacked or inverted, things like that. But if we're just like this, you're kind of at least exposing some of those muscles to a little bit of movement every couple hours, or at least before you step on the mats, maybe as you're driving to the gym, like you're stopped at a stoplight, you can kind of get a little bit of movement in. Oftentimes, a teeny little bit is better than nothing, right? So like a couple minutes here and there, a couple minutes every hour often does the trick.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have, I work not for nonprofit, so I work with at-risk youth, and then there's days where I'm on my feet the entire day, and then
Mhm.
my prep days I could be sitting like the whole day doing the administrative stuff. So it could go from
Yeah,
one end to the other.
yeah, and it's like it's so different sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Um, do you notice any differences between your male clients and female clients for like injuries and things that you're helping with them for recovery?
I'll put my male clients on blast right now and say I notice my female clients are better at actually doing their homework and actually sticking to things. I've told Rachel this. I've told a bunch of my female clients this. Weirdly, it seems like the female jiu-jitsu athletes that I work with are much more dedicated to doing their stuff and getting better. But as far as injuries go, I would say not really. I think sure, maybe like your typical like female grappler might kind of be able to get into some of those more kind of like weird bendy positions a little bit more. But realistically, while I would expect that, I'm not really seeing too much of a difference in terms of injuries between male grapplers and female grapplers.
Okay. Okay. It's good to know. I was kind of interested. Just with like, different framing and stuff like that, I thought that
Hmm.
maybe there's something a little bit different there. But I know it's
Yeah.
for me, for example, like I have two children and I hit the hips. I have the
Mhm.
hardest time with like some of the movements in jujitsu where I have a lot of pain in like the left side. So yeah,
Yes. How old are your kids?
3 and 6.
Okay, so it's been a while. Like, so the hips you're saying are still kind of bothering you then.
Yeah, still stiff. I go to physio as well, and I just like I'm doing those exercises, and I feel like I'll get a little bit better, and then it's just like they're stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tricky part sometimes because I think a lot of times it's like, oh, like we get a bit better and then sometimes people just kind of taper off as well. Once they get a little bit better, they're like, oh, I'm good. I don't need to do this anymore. But then other times it's like, are the exercises being progressed enough to kind of like meet our new better point to kind of continue to push us a little bit further, stuff like that.
Yeah, I know with life I can peter off things, so some of that'll probably be my fault. I'll
Yeah.
have to
And
admit
it's
that.
tough. It's tough as well, right? Like here, sure, in clinic, we kind of like want someone to be doing these exercises all the time, but like life gets busy. There's a lot of other stuff going on. We try and make it work however we can, hopefully.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's fair. Um, I guess with athletes or your clients who want to do jujitsu for the long haul, like what's some of your advice to them? Like aside from like the snacks, you were talking about the cars. Is there any other things like that you can give advice to keep people on the mats, especially where it's such a varying degree? Like I'm in my 40s, for example, and I'd like to be doing it
Yeah.
a lot longer.
Yeah. I actually just had this conversation with someone earlier, because probably my number one goal for doing this is to try and keep people on the mats for longer, right? Whether that's just like throughout their life or if an injury happens, trying to get them back on the mats as soon as possible. But going back to some of the things that I might have mentioned before, I think as far as like generic easy advice goes, probably the number one biggest um, determinant of how sustainable you're going to be able to keep that jiu-jitsu training is going to be some type of like supplemental strength and conditioning on the side, right? I think if we're doing just jiu-jitsu and that's our only form of physical activity, that's the only thing we're doing,
Mhm.
then we're just gonna be breaking down some of those parts because that's the only thing we're using them for. We're not building them to be any stronger, but we're also not giving ourselves any variability in how we're using our body, right? So the stuff that gets used is the only stuff that gets used. We're not really using anything else. We're not dispersing that load anywhere else, and we're also not on the back end making the stuff that gets used any stronger,
Okay.
right? Yeah, that would probably be the easiest advice to kind of act on is just to get some very basic, very simple, if you're doing nothing, very basic, very simple strength and conditioning done.
Okay. Have you noticed people coming across that like have only done martial arts, only done jujitsu, and that's what you're noticing is like some areas are very strong, and then obviously other areas are overcompensating, and then injury happens?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is like um that's a big thing that I notice. Or it's like when they start to bump up their training, say they're prepping for a competition, or say they have a sudden spark of like inspiration or motivation, and they start coming to class 5 times a week instead of doing just like once or twice a week. They're suddenly doing so much more, and the body that could handle twice a week is then all of a sudden thrown into the deep end. And again, there's not much of a buffer there, so when people come in for injuries, if it's not a traumatic one, if it's not like, oh, this happened on the mats and I felt something pop, then that's probably the biggest reason why someone would be coming in is they're just not doing anything on the back end to support that.
Okay. All right. And what about like I guess what do you have a crazy story like of someone that has come in that you've had to work with to try to like help with rehabilitation?
Interesting. Actually, nothing really comes to like I so in terms of crazy, and you've already talked to Rachel, but like I thought that was pretty crazy, like giving birth and then deciding, oh, I need to compete in what, 2 months or something like that. It was a sprint to kind of get her back on the mats, back training, touching all these pieces. And I think like if anything, um, that's kind of like proof of concept of not of what I do, but like of how important having something on the back end to strengthen all these pieces again
Mhm.
is going to be, whether that's strength and conditioning, whether that's rehab. She was doing both, right? That is probably a very good case study in how much that's going to help, because she was doing it even like before, kind of like while she was pregnant, before she gave birth, just to kind of like be strong enough before that all that trauma happened, and then
Mhm.
before we had to rebuild afterwards. Like trauma being childbirth.
Yeah. No, totally
Yeah,
fair.
yeah.
My second kid, I was with a workout group doing strength training up until about halfway through, and then I started having some major complications and couldn't. And I felt a huge difference from the first childbirth where I was able to be active the entire way through, bounce back
Hmm.
a lot quicker, and then the second round was a lot more. It was a huger, bigger uphill climb
Yeah.
to get
Yeah,
back to.
and like of course as a man it's very easy for me to stand on my soapbox and tell you guys to do things, but like there's so much going on, right?
Totally fair. But male or female, there's like the traumatic injuries that happen, right? And
Yeah.
and it can take a long. What's the average usually like? I know some people obviously could probably stay with you a lot longer, just kind of like that maintenance mode. But like a general recovery from like a jujitsu injury, usually how long is that kind of like uphill battle?
Mm. I think it's of course gonna depend on the injury, on the scale of the injury, but I think like a 6 to 12 week timeline for most injuries wouldn't be too out of the question, right? Like even with some of our more minor ones, like 4 to 6 weeks is kind of what we're thinking for any type of like strain or sprain. And that doesn't mean like 6 to 12 weeks before someone's back on the mats, right? We try and get them back on the mats as soon as possible in some limited way. But as far as like end of rehab goes or like graduation day goes, that's probably going to be looking like that 6 to 12 week timeline.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. And it's kind of funny because that's usually a lot of you hear the 4 to 6 weeks, a lot of other
Yeah.
things outside of physiotherapy. So, um, how do you help with kind of like the frustration or the people getting stuck, like the support there for like, especially if someone's wanting to compete and they're just like, because the mindset too, that can be a big hindrance from kind of that
Yeah.
rehab portion.
Yeah. That's the toughest part sometimes. And that's all the stuff that they don't teach you in school is like, oh, like what about all this like interpersonal stuff that you got to deal with? Like you got to keep this person motivated. You got to talk to this person while they're down because they can't train, or you got to navigate this like frustration because stuff has gotten pissed off again because we've irritated something because we've jumped on the mats or something like that. The way I'll approach it often is I think the more clarity we can set at the very start of rehab, the better. So at the end of that first session I have with someone, I try to make sure that both of us can see where we're at now, where we need to be, and kind of like break that down into multiple stages, kind of like reverse engineering from that end goal, but also providing for that person very clear, I guess, like metrics that they need to be able to hit before moving on to each stage. Right. So with something like jiu-jitsu, like very, very simplified, we might break that down into kind of like three simple stages where they're kind of going back to like the technique portion first, kind of like the drilling portion where you kind of know where your body's going to be. You kind of know how little resistance you're going to be able to feel. So it's easy to get into.
Mhm.
And then we start to dial up resistance from there where they start to, maybe there's a bit more resistance with that drilling. Maybe it's something like a positional sparring or something like that, and then we dial into full rolls and competition level intensity after that. But in each stage, hopefully I've explained it well enough to where whoever I'm working with knows, oh, I need to be able to do this, this, and this before I can go back on the mats. Or I need to be able to do this, this, and this before I'm clear to start rolling again. Um, and I've started even kind of like implementing a bit of like a traffic light system on top of that to where you might be phase one where you're returning to technique. But if that's a yellow light, that means we might still need to sit out if it's this specific technique or if it's technique in this specific position so that there's even more nuance and even more clarity around where we're at and where we need to be. And that, for the most part, cleans up a lot of the troubles in between where it's like oh, I'm not back to training yet, and then you can just be like, hey, you don't have this yet, you don't have this yet, you don't have this yet, so it makes sense that you're not back to training.
Mhm.
And it kind of helps us refocus on building what needs to be built before jumping on the mats.
Okay. Well, thank you for that explanation. That's actually really good because I can appreciate it be a bit complicated because I mean, so much happens when you get on the mat and like depending on who you're rolling with, what your level is, what your game is, like
Mhm.
that can be quite
Yeah,
that can
there's a lot to go through, but yeah.
Now, do you find like with your location where you're mobile, are you doing stuff in your gym setting as well as on the mats too, where you're like working with some of your clients actually like there?
That's honestly the fun part. And if nothing else, that's actually what makes me wish I was better at jiu-jitsu, because there's definitely clients where I'd be like, oh, I wish I could challenge you in some of these positions or kind of like give you looks at some of these things, but I'm just not good enough to do it. So like I'll be like, go with this partner instead, and they'll kind of give you that. But yes, for the people or for the cases where that's possible, sometimes I'll just like we'll have a rehab session down here, and then depending on what it's looking like upstairs, we might pop upstairs and get like a couple rehab rounds in if timing works out, just to allow them to kind of like feel some of those positions. Because like you said, it's so chaotic sometimes on the mats. While we can control it a ton here, we're either too scared subconsciously to try and use that position or use that technique, or we are not sure what it's going to be like when we go into it. So I think being able to control that and being able to feel that one on one is very helpful as well. And it's been a blessing to have the gym right upstairs. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that gives you quite an edge too because of that like personalized approach and actually that live ability to go in and then you can see like, oh, this isn't working right, or this doesn't look like good movement here, and you can kind of pull them back and go,
Hmm.
okay, let's regroup
Yeah.
and go back to your stages. So
Yeah. Like
yeah.
at the other place I'm at, sometimes we would just do that on the turf. And some of the other people I'd be working with would give me weird looks. I think they're used to it at this point, but they're like, why are you guys rolling around on the ground? It's rehab, don't worry. But yeah,
It's a jujitsu thing. Don't worry about it.
exactly.
How long have you been practicing jujitsu?
Um, I used to be embarrassed to tell people that I started like my very first class was I think back in 2012 maybe back when I came back. So I came back from Japan and I was like I want to do jiu-jitsu. But this was back when I was in undergrad, so of course I was treating it like a university student where I would go very consistently for a couple weeks and then I'd stop for a couple months. So I don't count that part. I started at JT6 3 4 years ago at this point, so it's been around that time.
Hey, that's good though. I mean, I always hear so many people say like, don't worry about the breaks, don't worry about that stuff. Life happens. Just like, happy to have you back, and like now you're feeling
Yeah.
like you're in a good spot. And how often do you usually train?
So nowadays I'm 4 times a week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying about like me having a practice here has been helpful in keeping it consistent because it's
Right.
just all the days I'd be here anyways.
Right.
So consistency has definitely been much better this time around compared to when I started.
That's fair. I have my spotties, like I've been training for 3 years, but really condensed it would be like closer to two if you take out all those like breaks in
Little
between.
breaks.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
But
all
like
are.
like you just said, everyone's like we're all on our own journey. It's like everyone's happy to have you back. Everyone's happy to kind of see you on the mats again. That's the important thing.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah.
find the culture where you're at?
Oh, I love it. I think it's definitely one of the reasons why I stuck around and one of the reasons why I've been able to build all of this here. Because there was a gym much closer to me that I had initially thought I was going to go to. But I knew some of my patients at the time were training there, and I was like, I don't know if I'm quite ready to be training with my patients just yet. So I Googled other gyms around, and I found this one. I was like, oh, it looks pretty cool. And I think as soon as I walked in, I felt so welcome. The community was great. I could feel, you can just feel the vibe sometimes when you walk into a gym. So
Mhm.
I just ever since that first class, I was like, I don't think I need to look for another place. I think I'm good here. And luckily, it's again turned into all of these opportunities, which is nice.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and that really goes to show like the support, right? Because you're able to really grow like what you're passionate about on top of being a part of such a great community. I mean, Rachel had just such wonderful things, and I see all the social media for their club, and it's just like a big family.
Yeah, and that's what it feels like sometimes. Like sometimes people from other gyms who I treat as well, they'll kind of mention that sometimes as well. They're like, "Oh, you guys are so tight knit," which is it's very true. It feels like family sometimes here, so I'm very lucky to have found this place.
Awesome. Um, Going back to the physiotherapy and like we kind of talked about, I kind of mentioned ahead of time, like, is there any like myths or training trends that are like overhyped or underrated that you're finding with people for like whether it's jujitsu, outside of jujitsu, like things that you're just noticing on social media, like in the world of physical health?
Yes. I think especially in the world of kind of like physical fitness or rehab, everything seems to kind of exist on kind of like a pendulum. Things will kind of like swing very extreme in one direction, and they'll kind of like swing back in another direction, and then hopefully eventually we fall into this like middle ground where the truth often is. Uh, the biggest example would probably be this whole knees over toes thing that kind of like exploded on the internet several years
Yes.
ago because um and let's start with this. I push a lot of my clients to kind of like throw their knees over their toes with a lot of their training because jiu-jitsu is going to put you into some of those angles, so you kind of need to get strong in that. But whenever something goes viral on the internet, and for something to go viral on the internet, especially on social media, you almost need to sell it as the only solution, right? So like everyone's like, oh, you have knee pain of any sort, just throw your knees over your toes, like do this kind of lunge. And
Mm,
whereas like 5, 6 years ago, I would be telling people to go knees over toes with their lunges. Now it's like people will come into clinic and they're like, oh, my knee hurts. And I've tried to fix it by doing this knees over toes lunge, and it's just making my knee more angry. So now I have to tell people to like stop because that's what's making your knee hurt. And then eventually we'll build back into it. There's a lot of trends like that, and there's a lot of kind of like there's always going to be battle back and forth between both camps because everyone thinks they're right, and everyone is right to a certain extent because again it just sits in some like middle ground where like that's where the truth often is. It's the same with this like whole eco versus drilling debate that's going on right now.
okay.
They're kind of like two sides of the same coin. There's just two different approaches to learning. I think like everyone's a bit extreme on kind of like it's my way or the highway kind of thing.
Yep. That's well said. It's so true. I laugh because I work with a personal trainer here with a group, and that knees over toes thing came up as well, and he just kind of went, mm-hmm. Like,
Yeah, and if this was like 2, 3 years ago, I bet both of us would be like, "Oh yeah, that stuff is great. Yes,
yeah,
do the knees over toes stuff."
yeah.
But yeah.
That's well, it's interesting. And it's true because you get on the bandwagon. I'm thinking about like the protein versus fiber. Like for women, it's
Oh,
like you need to
I'm getting
have.
so much of that. Yeah.
Okay, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay. So I'm just seeing it on my TikTok nowadays. Is like for some reason I'm on Fiverr TikTok. I'm on Fiverr Talk. Um,
Okay.
so but like coming in as someone who's I guess like sure I have like what you undergrad year first year understanding of nutrition. So I'm by no means an expert,
Mhm.
right? But a lot of what I'm seeing is like, oh, hey, wow, this is all stuff that I just completely neglected. I would had never really thought about fiber intake after first year of undergrad where I had to think about it. And everything is just like pumped full of, I think if you put protein in the front of anything, you just automatically make a bit more money. And I think that's also why everyone's chasing protein. Again, I think it goes back to that middle ground. We probably need a bit of fiber. We probably need enough protein as well.
That's fair. That's
Very
true.
boring answer, but I think that's my thoughts.
No, and the hard part now is like the sensationalist of the fear that you have to have this. Like even myself, I've been living in a I'm doing this wrong. I need at least 40 grams of protein in the morning to sustain like whatever my metabolism and all this stuff. And it's just like I'm constantly feeling like there's all these ticks that I'm not achieving based on the content that is constantly coming at me. So yeah, like how do you ride that wave with your clients?
I was actually gonna mention that because I think again social media is effective that way because we have to sell something as oh this is very important, otherwise it's not going to get clicks, otherwise it's not going to get engagement, and it's just going to fall off. But because of that you start having people come in there, they like kind of like you said will kind of like freak out if we haven't done that one thing on that checklist, where I think it's hard to kind of have this conversation sometimes because there's a lot of fear around it as well. And like you're not changing someone's mind if they're like super set on something. So it's more just like, kind of like with jiu-jitsu, you kind of like ride it for a little bit. You try and find openings here and there where you kind of like, guide the conversation to something else and kind of just show someone that, oh, there might it's not the end of the world if this doesn't happen, or it's not the end of the world if I break form when I'm doing this exercise. Not the end of the world if I don't feel my glutes before I do a deadlift or something like that. Um, it's kind of just like helping convince someone that the body is a lot more resilient and a lot more adaptable than we often give it credit for. Um, with some of these like checklists of like all these things we have to do to optimize health, I think we almost like fragilize the human body sometimes, where it's like, oh, if I don't do all these things, I'm screwed. Where sure, like these things are probably great for health and kind of for longevity, but I don't think we would have made it this far as a species if we had to, do all these things for just to survive, right? It was the same with like when people come in and they ask about orthotics or things like that. It's like I sure there's cases for that, but I don't think we would have made it this far if we needed a piece of plastic under our feet to be able to survive without pain, kind of thing, right? And I'm just orthotics came to mind as I'm not picking on orthotics, but
No.
it just came to mind,
Totally fair. No, that's good. Because yeah, it's I just think of even about myself, and I'm so guilty of that now. Like all of those, like all these little, you get like that comfort, not the comfort, but like you need so many more products and services and things to just like live day to day. And it's
Yeah.
it's wild. Like, how do you talk people off the ledge when they come to you?
Oh my God, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's like it's definitely a long-term play instead of like like we talked about. You're not convincing anyone on day one. If they come in and they're like, "Oh, I'm screwed if I don't get all this done," you just you play along with it, and then eventually you kind of uh, hopefully have some meaningful conversations to try and like get your idea across. Because who's to say I'm 100% right as well, right? Like it's kind of like understanding both ends of it and finding some type of middle ground.
Right. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Well, that's interesting. I'm glad. Thank you. I appreciate that because, yeah, there's so much out there. And of course, like you said, like there's just like these two camps constantly. And it's nice to find people that are like kind of more in the middle. Like, yes, there's a pro for this and a con for this and a pro for this and a con for this. And it depends on your body type and kind of
Mhm.
like, what it is that you need to kind of be
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah, and it's like it's my inherent bias, but I feel like being able to see that middle ground and being able to see rationale for both sides is when you truly understand the argument, or when you truly have an understanding of what's going on, right? Instead of just this like very one-sided view of the world, because there's always going to be multiple answers to something, or multiple kind of like truths. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot that we don't know, I guess.
totally fair. And there's always a lot
Mhm.
of overlap. Like you said, it's kind of like you can kind of see where things can go. And I like to try to think, I know I can get swept up in biases or get caught up in the shuffle of the newest trends, but kind of over time, I hope to kind of be more in the middle of like, okay, that
Yeah,
wasn't the end all be all, but there's some good stuff or it doesn't work for me. So
yeah,
yeah. Um, I guess for like, do you notice that in like in the club as well? Like, or do you get like a lot of conversations around these different like hypes and myths and stuff where you're like, oh my, okay.
yes, but yeah. I think again, like this goes back to that whole like eco versus drilling thing. It's very hot right now, so like people are going to be talking about it. People are going to be asking about it. So yes, I do get pulled into that sometimes because I think with physio in the rehab world, we've been seeing movement as kind of we've been seeing things through this ecological dynamics lens for a while now in rehab and in the world of fitness and in kind of like strength and conditioning. So these are all kind of like arguments and kind of like points that luckily I've heard before and kind of been exposed to. And there's always going to be that kind of pushback. I think there was a bunch of pushback in the basketball world when they were first trying to kind of play with some of these newer thought processes. But yeah, I just get pulled into that every now and then because I think they know that I think about movement through that same dynamic lens, and I think about coaching or kind of like training through that same like constraints led or kind of ecological lens as well. So they're like, oh, you must be on our side. You must kind of be like very eco, like a huge fan of eco as well. And sure, like I see movement like that. There's probably value to both in some way.
Okay.
Yeah, I went on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, no, that's good. It's good because again, it's these things that people are thinking about and talking about, so it's nice to hear that. And I guess work-life balance for you, how do you balance all of this? Because as a physical therapist, like you must, how do you get turned that off? You must hear questions all the time. Hey, check this out. Hey, check like
Yeah, there is no work-life balance. Work-life balance doesn't exist. And I think sometimes I put myself into that situation because I like really open lines of communication with clients. Like I want to, and it's almost sometimes I feel like I'm micromanaging, but I want to know how a training session has gone. I want to know how things have gone. I want to know how we're feeling before you come back in for a follow-up, just so that we're not wasting time. You're not coming in, you're like, oh no, nothing makes sense, everything hurts. Right. But
right.
because of that, like as you can see with how bad I've been at responding to some of your messages before we set this up, like sometimes I'm just flooded with stuff and I'm like, I just want to turn my brain off and do absolutely nothing. So I've been trying to get better at that, like every other Saturday. So 2 Saturdays a month, I'll just
Okay.
do absolutely nothing. And it's good. I'll just step away from rehab, I'll step away from jiu-jitsu, and it's much needed. I need to be better at that.
It's fair. You can put a
Yeah.
sleep mode on your Instagram account too, just FYI.
Yeah, but sometimes that stresses me out even more than
Oh,
if,
really?
right? Because it's like, oh, what if I miss all these messages? Exactly. There was this one time I'm going on a tangent again, but I was up in like I was in like upstate New York for a hike with some friends and I had no service and I was freaking out. I was like, what if I miss all these messages? What's gonna happen? But it was so peaceful. It felt so good to just not be able to see my phone. And surprise, surprise, when I got back to my phone, the world hadn't ended, nothing was on fire. So I think I need to take a lesson from that
Yeah,
and kind of learn to step away.
it's fair. Otherwise, you're always living and breathing what you do, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
so even when you're engaging in activities, that peaceful moment, was anybody on the hike being like, hey, check this out, or any questions about their mobility?
No, but there were times where like because like there were times where I was like, oh, this would be a good exercise. Oh, this is I'm feeling this because I'm using this muscle or something like that. There have been times where I've woken up in the middle of the night to scribble down like an exercise or something like that. I'm not that intense anymore, but like back earlier in my career, there have been times where I think I almost got into an accident once because I was thinking about how to how to set up an exercise for someone. So I'm getting better. I'm getting better compared to
Okay.
before.
Do you find yourself just like, again, just with like time and experience, like that, like not panic, but just that intensity versus like now where you're like, you just feel more confident in like kind of building and seeing.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I'll relate it to like jujitsu, where it's like at the start, you're just going hard, you're spazzing, you're trying everything. Whereas like you've kind of built systems at a certain point, and you kind of like know how or what kind of reactions you're gonna get, whether to a rehab intervention or whether to a technique on the mats. So you kind of see that a bit more clearly, so you can kind of chill a bit more instead of just always being on alert and like not knowing what the next step is gonna be, I guess.
Okay. Cool. And what is your favorite thing to kind of I treat in physiotherapy? What are some of like your like that you're like, yeah.
I really like shoulders and knees. And back when I was getting into this whole mobility thing, hips were a bit of a special interest for me as well. But like right now, I would probably say shoulders and knees are sure they're very common in jiu-jitsu as well, but they're kind of just areas or joints or issues that I because I see often, I kind of have a lot of different things to do with. I kind of have I would hope, decent understanding of how things are going to go.
Hmm.
So if you're going to be like, oh, yeah, what's your favorite area to treat? It would probably be those shoulders and
Okay. All right. Speaking of shoulders, so I
yeah.
saw maybe back to trends a little bit. I saw this another TikTok of like shoulder problems, just do hangs. What do you, because I have like I can reach up to a certain point and then there's just like a sharp pain and I can't move it any further. So I saw this thing. I'm like, so do I just do I just like hang off of my my bar at home?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, how deep do you want to get? Um, I would say like short answer for that, like if it hurts to get overhead, then hanging probably is not going to be the answer for you right now,
Okay.
because you're just taking a joint that is already painful here and you're just jamming it even more in that painful position,
Hmm.
right? Sure, there's value in hanging because it kind of like decompresses the joint. It kind of makes all the surrounding musculature work to kind of help stabilize in that position. But a more important first step is probably to be able to get into the position to hang without pain first. Right.
Okay.
Again, like wrapping this back to this whole knees over toes thing, it was like if your knee hurts to do this, then going knees over toes is probably not going to help because you're doing more of this. Right. So I think that's probably how I would approach that. It's like probably want to open this up first and then hang all you want, or kind of responsibly build into hanging all you want.
All right.
Um, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my thoughts around hanging.
No, that's good because I was starting to do it and I'm like, man, this sucks. This hurts. My back felt great because I'm like
Oh yeah.
stretching out my back. I'm like, fantastic. But I was like holding my breath, trying to like hang and just feeling the sharp pain on the outside of my shoulder, being like, when does this get better?
Yeah, and then you're not even really getting some of those like benefits from it because you're so tense trying to fight against the pain while you're in that position.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, good to know. See, another trend. Like, and it was just one of those, whatever floods your algorithm, right? So now I'm starting to see a lot of shoulder stuff, and that was like, huh, interesting. That's easy. I've got a squat rack. I can do that. Like,
I haven't seen the hanging stuff in a while actually. I'm surprised. I was surprised when you brought it up because I hadn't seen the hanging trend in the past several years. I guess it's popping back up. It's everything's cyclical, I guess.
you'll see it now because our phones have heard
Yeah,
it, so it'll.
yeah. It's probably my entire For You page. It's just a bunch of hanging
Sorry for that.
now.
Well, that's awesome. So, I anything else that you'd like to chat about? Advice for the people out there keeping the
Mm,
longevity game.
I think one thing that I do talk about with like jiu-jitsu athletes as opposed to some of my other athletes is just like considerations around the positions that we need to be on the mats, right? We'd kind of previously hinted at it, but like that deep knee bend, like your spine kind of has to be able to round all the way. So sure, like your normal strength and conditioning is great, but also like not fearing some of those positions and slowly finding someone to help you with that, or slowly building into it yourself when you're building resilience and strength in some of those weird positions that we're bound to find on the mats and we can't really avoid. Like this whole I need to keep my spine neutral at all times thing, it completely falls apart as soon as you do jiu-jitsu, like as soon as you do anything on the mats, right? Because you're going to be in some of these like bent and weird positions. So a better approach is probably to strengthen it instead of avoid it, um, as long as it's medically uh, safe to do so.
Right.
Had to cover my bases
Totally
there.
fair. Within reason of what your health status is like.
Exactly.
Totally fair. Yeah, because I've had quite a few. My biggest one is spraining my toes and my fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't even think about that. It's like we don't think about some of those small little joints, but I think it'd be hard to find a jiu-jitsu gym where people don't have finger and toe stuff going on.
I have to learn how to tape my fingers now because they just want to go every which way, and then I'm like, crap. Now
Yeah,
I
it's
can't do
it's what
anything with them.
it's one of the prices we pay. I can barely wear some of my rings now. Like they just don't fit over some of my knuckles anymore. So I just got to find different fingers to put my rings on.
I guess for injuries for you, what injuries have you come across any in your time of training? Like aside from
Yeah.
fingers?
Yeah. So, probably March of last year was when I tore my MCL.
Oh,
So that was fun to document actually. It wasn't fully torn. I just kind of popped a little bit. And then March of this year, I think it was March, was when I had a bit of an AC joint separation. So my shoulder kind of separated a little bit. Again, luckily quite minor. So both were just opportunities to kind of like audit my own process, but also it just made for such good content. Like people would come into the gym and be like, "Yo, I love following your shoulder rehab journey." I'd be like, "Thanks, man. It's been fun."
nice.
So yeah, a couple of those, and like because I like to try and invert every now and then, I'll get like overstacked, or my neck will feel sore, my back will feel sore, so stuff like that often tends to happen. But
Okay.
part of the game.
Yeah, totally fair. Did you find it trickier trying to rehab yourself than working with other people?
1000%. I think we're we're always going to be our own first client. Like I think again, the fact that I had to or I made myself document every single week of it and post content with it kept me a lot more accountable.
Mhm.
But I definitely went back to the mats a bit sooner than I would have advised someone else to. I just like my excuse to myself was like, oh, I can feel all this in real time and I can kind of modify or kind of like change what I'm doing if I need to. But
Okay.
luckily, that was fine.
You
It
didn't
worked
set
out. It
yourself
worked
back.
out. No, I did not set myself back. It all worked out very well this time.
Nice. I also noticed you were kind of doing a split thing for a while. Are you still working on
Oh yeah.
that?
I've gotten lazy for the last little bit, but I was chasing splits for a while. I think like back in 2022, and then I don't remember what happened, but I think like Rachel came up to me and she challenged me to a splits race. So I was like, hey, this is the only thing I can beat you at. Are you sure you want to do this? And I haven't seen her do splits in a while, so I think maybe that's why I've fallen off. So
Okay, so
I'll bug her about it later today, and we'll both get back on it.
I'll be watching. I'll be checking you guys out
Let's
to be like, where's the split squad challenge?
Yeah, we'll see who wins. It'll be
It's like, have you done it like were you able to do splits like because I know you have years in like martial arts and have done different things of like flexibility always been okay for you that way?
No, I think people are surprised when I tell them this, but I not that I move amazingly right now, but I used to have terrible mobility. Like I couldn't before say like 2020 when I like deep dived into mobility and kind of like a lot of the stuff I do now, I couldn't even squat past parallel. Like I was my squat was terrible. I couldn't like the reason splits became a thing for me in say like 2022 was because prior to that, as soon as I spread my legs out to the side, I would just feel a hard pinch in both hips. And I was like, oh, after this 2 years of doing all this hip mobility stuff, let's try this splits thing again. And surprisingly, it worked. And I was able to kind of get into that. So it's been a fun journey for myself to kind of like build a lot of this mobility. I think sometimes people see some of the stuff I'm doing and they're like, oh, it must be nice to have been flexible your whole life. But no, I was a terrible mover back then. And there's still a long way to go, but I sucked back before I did any of this stuff.
Wow. But that's it's good hearing that to know that people can work towards it. Like there's
Yeah.
hope for that too, right? Like
Yeah.
because yeah, I would have just made that assumption like, oh, you must have been always like flexible that way, right? Because I know
Yeah.
I
A
could
lot
do
of
the
people.
splits.
But eventually, maybe you'll join this race as well. Maybe this will be through a race.
Okay, that sounds good. I think I need some accountability.
Yeah, I think that'll help. That'll help all of us. But yeah, I
Okay.
think that's why I like to tell that story. It's like it shows that yes, the human body is adaptable. Everyone's going to have like a different ceiling or whatever, but for the most part, we can make improvement in most things.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. It's really cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. It was
Thank
really
you for
great
having me.
to chat with you and kind of hear the stories. And I look forward to continue on and seeing your journey. And I'll insert myself into that split challenge
All right,
and see if we can
I'll be
get back
looking out for your splits.
to get back on that. Oh God. And anyways, I'll tag everything when we get this up and running. All the ways to find you and follow you and. Yeah, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I just kind of went on a bunch of different tangents and we just snowballed, but it was a fun conversation. Thanks for having me.
I love it. That's I like it to be natural and you just kind of get those kind of cool kind of stories in there and hopefully we get some nuggets of, stuff that we can apply to our lives and just feel like things are doable and that there's hope for, creating kind of that healthy mindset and having a healthy routine.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.